Welcome to the Victory Multisport podcast. This is Coach Sarge, and I'm joined today by the founders of Victory, Coach Scott.
Hey there.
And Coach Kenny.
What up?
Well, today we wanted to talk about how Victory has evolved past the Iron Dad 28 podcast. But before we do that, Kenny, I know that on the last podcast you mentioned that you were in Hawaii. And I don't think everybody that's listening and seeing the podcast understands exactly why you were there. Want to tell us about that?
Yeah, so Hawaii was just a work trip. It's an incentive trip for recognizing top salespeople. So just having a really good year, working my 8 to 5 job, full blast, and just was, God blessed me with another opportunity. I think I've had 20 of them now, or 21 of them, where I've been to some beautiful places: Hawaii, France, Vail, Colorado, Whistler, just by setting up a W-2.
Yeah, well, by getting in the corners, getting dirty, and digging out that work, and making things happen for your company. Absolutely,
It's great. I was able to take say, and so it's a trip we look forward to. Hopefully this year, God willing, I'll be in Ireland.
Absolutely, awesome. And Coach Scott, I think some good things have happened with you as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I recently expanded responsibilities at work, picked up a few more departments. Again, similar to Kenny, very fortunate, very blessed. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I think it's a testament to both of you on how the intensity that you each have with, Victory Multisport, with athletic training yourselves, Kenny getting ready for Ironman Arizona, and just the passion and how you pour into everything that you guys do. So congratulations to both of you. Fantastic. So today we did want to take a step back and go back in time to the beginning, which has been almost 2 years now since the launch, but probably more than that time for both of you, thinking about what you were going to do, how you might do it, and so forth.
2 years?
I think it's coming up on 2 years, hasn't it been?
It feels like it's like 2 days, doesn't it?
It has gone very, very fast.
Well, it's exciting. And, I've just relished the fact that you're kind of taking me in and bringing me along on this. And hopefully I'm bringing that value that we knew we needed. But it's been a wild ride, just the 9 months that I've been 100% engaged in this process with you, and since getting my certification and coming alongside you. So I think we wanted to talk more about that in a minute. But to really backstop this, Kenny's been able to tell his story of how he started in multisport, in endurance, in this crazy world we all live in and love. So I think that we wanted Coach Scott to be able to backstop, where's he coming from? I do know that he was a collegiate athlete in track and field.
Big hair too.
And he had big
lots
hair.
Of hair. Yeah.
I think Kenny had big hair at one point.
No, never had big hair.
Sarge had big hair in high school, so as well. So, Coach Scott, where'd you come from? How did this all evolve?
So really my journey with endurance sports goes way back to when I was like 10 years old. At the time, my father was living an unhealthy lifestyle, was overweight, smoked a pipe. Was probably everything that we're not today. And so he went to whatever standard doctor, checkup, physical, came home and just started walking every day. And, as a kid, you're like, milling around the house. You're curious what your parents are doing. Well, I noticed he started running. And so he started running a little bit every day, and I noticed it was getting a little more and a little more. And before I knew it, I was like, what is he doing? So I literally just threw on, I can remember throwing on, blue jeans, white t-shirt, and my Nike shoes, and just going out and running a little bit with him every day. And before we knew it, I was running with him every single day. And a little bit became a little more and a little more and a little more. And before we knew it, we were running like a mile. And then a mile became a couple miles. And then a couple miles became 3 and 4 and whatever. And so what happened was he decided, all right, I'm going to put a goal out there to run a 10K. Because back then, early 80s, you didn't have a lot of 5K events. They were mostly 10Ks. And you, in the summertime, you could pretty much find one like every single weekend. And so he identified a 10K that he wanted to run. And I was like, what the hell? I'm going to give it a shot too. So I jumped in and I ran it, and I ran really well. I was shocked at how well I did.
Was that your hometown?
It was, yeah. It literally, the starting line, I think, was like a quarter mile behind our house. And I something that day just kind of lit a little bit of a fire. And then we did another 10K like 2 weeks later, and another one a few weeks later. And I was like, okay, that was kind of fun. But the fall came, and I didn't really stick with the sport as much. You know, I was young kid, so I was into the standard sports, basketball, baseball, that kind of stuff. And but my dad kept running, kept enjoying it. Fast forward to the springtime, I'm like, okay, I'm going to start running again with him. So we go through the same cycle of running 10Ks. That's when, for me, it really grabbed hold. And the reason was because I started actually winning. And I was like, wow, this is a great feeling.
Feels
like as
good,
a kid,
right?
yeah, I was like, because as a kid, you know, I wasn't super athletic. I didn't get good grades. We had just moved to a new town, and I felt like I was really struggling to find that footing. And then all of a sudden, I tasted a little bit of success, and I was like, well, that felt pretty good. And so what happened was I ran that entire summer, and I started winning my age group, like in all of these local events. And obviously this is before internet and before all that kind of stuff. So there would be, you know, you'd have the results would be whatever on the sports page, local sports page and stuff. And sure enough, that was a big thrill. Like every Monday I'd get the sports page and see my name as the winner of an age group of a local 10K. And so all of a sudden, you know, you get to the end of that school year or the end of that summer, and the high school cross country coach called me at home, and he said, hey, look, I know you're going into 7th grade next year. I see you're showing up at all of these races. Would you mind coming and training a little bit with the high school team? And I was thrilled. I was like, dude, this is cool. Like, here's somebody that's actually showing interest in something that I think I'm really enjoying. And so I ended up showing up. The people on the team were super accepting. Like the guys on the team were like, you know, at first, you know, it's the standard, like, who's this little kid with us, but very welcoming, very embracing. And then from there, it just kept growing. Like I kept running a little bit more. You know, I started to enter, you know, at the time they would have been junior high races and stuff like that. And then before I know it, I was in high school and started running. And then what really I noticed was that I almost became addicted to the sensation of achievement. And you know, I started to learn how to race. I started to learn how to win. I started to learn how to handle defeat. Like, it taught me so many things along the way. And there was a stretch there where I started to figure out, like, and you know, like all through those formative years, you change mentally, you change physically.
Multiple times.
Like, oh yeah. Like, and so what I noticed was, I mean, obviously everybody on the team knows me. I'm not exactly a tall guy. And so what I noticed was all my competition was changing, and they were getting taller, they were getting stronger. And I was like, oh my gosh, I had a moment where I was like, am I really good enough to do this?
Right.
And that's where I think I really fell in love with the beauty of this sport, because I made the mental decision that I am going to be great. And I don't know what that looks like, but once I made the mental decision, I was all in.
Then the work came, and you did the work, and you didn't care.
That's right.
It may have still hurt, but you went through it because the end game was what you were focused on.
Correct.
Right. What was in high school or junior high school, what was your like best event, or what was your primary? Were you in middle distance, or you?
Yeah. So I it's kind of crazy. Like a baseball equivalent would be like, I was kind of like a utility guy.
Okay.
In track. So in track, what they do is they typically break it up. So you have sprinters, you have middle distance, and you have long distance. The sprint stuff is 100, 200, middle distance is like 400, 800, longer distance is 1600 plus for high school.
Right.
I actually would run on our 4x4 relay. So the 400, which is considered more of middle distance, closer to a sprint. And then I would go all the way up to a 2 mile.
Wow.
And I would run 4 events typically for every single meet. And I loved it. Again, like it's funny because I coach a lot of high school athletes now. And one of the things I tell them all the time is, look, when you go to race, it's about the mentality side of it. Like there was a period where I didn't lose any races for what felt like for years. And then there were periods though where, like when I transitioned from high school into college, I got shellacked like the first couple practices. Like I'll never forget, like I literally had been winning nonstop for years. I go to my first collegiate practice. I was 13th on the team. I was like, what is this? This is crazy. Like I've never looked at this many backs. Like this is nuts. And so, I had to go back to that place and kind of tap that mentality of, and again, coming back to my prior comment about coaching the high school students, and what I tell them is like, look, did I win every race? No. But did I think I was going to win every race? Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Like every time you toe the line, you think, I'm going to win. I'm going to give it my all. And through the preparation of training, usually you have a good result. Now, sometimes it doesn't work out that way. And if it didn't, hey, look, it's okay. It's just part of the experience, part of the process. For me, and obviously we're all much older now. When you look back and you look at the evolution of that, for me, what started as a curiosity because of my father's poor health habits and his willingness to correct that. And even back then, like that was not a popular move to start jogging and running. At all. Yeah, late 70s, early 80s, you didn't necessarily see that. So, again, in hindsight, I appreciate that courage. And then as a kid to be curious, to join your parent. And we had years where we ran together. I mean, that's a connection that will never, ever be broken. And then to have that evolve into success, like athletic success, which then did lead to more of an academic success for me. I became more confident with classroom. I became more confident in social circles. To have that then lead into something I was doing in college, absolutely crazy. Then now, fast forward, as an adult, I definitely am not on any podiums any longer. But,
you're on the podium in life, though, with your family, your job. So you've taken that winning mentality,
absolutely,
and spun it into multiple things.
Absolutely. Like now, winning looks different. It doesn't feel any different. It just looks different.
Absolutely, mm-hmm. It's always a metamorphosis, and it's going to continue to change as life changes. And like, to your point, there's different goals, aspirations, and accomplishments that you're going to continue to make, that we're all going to continue to make, that our team. The athletes on the team are going to continue to make in life because they're doing this, because they're still trying to seek challenging their body, their mind, their capabilities. That makes all the other things better as well, because that success bleeds over into all the other aspects of life. It's not just about being the fastest at Ironman or the fastest at the marathon. We are getting PRs. We are breaking through barriers. We are getting people over those hurdles that they may have seen in the past. But it's affecting everything that they're doing, everything that we're doing. We're all better people for it.
I 100% agree. I can't tell you guys how many times that within some of those formative years when I was in races and I thought, I don't know if I can do this. And then you get to that point where, and every athlete goes through this, where you're at that point of inflection where it's like you have to decide, am I going to do this or not? Like the pain is so great, you're struggling, You feel like everything's moving against you, and then you just you consciously make the decision. I'm in. I'm going. I had that translate to so many different spaces in my life. So many. If you think about it, and I know we're all from, sort of the same area here of Western PA, Eastern Ohio. For me, and I've lived all around the U.S. I've walked into some meetings where there were hundreds of people I had to speak to, and it was on the West Coast, and I had that moment of, you can do this. Like, it's the same sort of mentally for me. It was the same moment of, all right, I have to decide, am I going to do this or not? And then you make the decision to do it and you move forward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So then you got this high school experience, you got the bug, if you will, from winning and from the acceleration. You went to the bigger pond and got toasted there a little bit as a freshman.
Actually, no. I actually lettered as a freshman.
Okay.
So
but you said that you were no longer the number one guy.
Yeah.
Right? You became the number 13 guy.
Yeah.
No, so you had to
you're
work
also
your way
racing
back.
against seniors. I mean, you're racing against men.
Yeah. Seniors that are in their mid-20s, some of them grad students and that kind of thing. And I was like, what the heck? But, it was interesting because, again, so when I came in, I was like 13th on the team. Big shock. But, again, I went to that same spot of, all right, you're going to do this or you're not going to do this. And if you're going to do this, you're going to go all in and you're going to give it everything you have. By the end of the year, I think I was like 4th on the team. Mm-hmm. I'd lettered. I went to NCAA regionals. And I looked back on that season in that period. That was probably one of the biggest growth, periods that I had in my life. Like, I had to make some decisions there, especially going into college, when you have a lot of distractions around, whatever, parties and people, friends, like doing different things. And you're like, look, my priorities are X, Y, and Z. I recently read an article that basically said, without, whether you know it or not, you are what you prioritize in life. Mm-hmm. So, you have to take a step back and look and see what's important. And those are the things that you go after.
And I think Kenny mentioned it earlier this week on a conversation we were having about with our athletes and with people that are trying to change themselves. They're going to catch hell. They're going to get their neighbors, their family being like, what, you going to run again? Really? You just ran yesterday, or you just did a long bike yesterday. And you really have to kind of fight through that to some degree because, the people that are not in the sport, they don't quite get that, obviously. That's why they're saying these negative comments or trying to bring negativity to an enormously positive improvement in someone's life or to even accomplish a goal or whatever their motivation is. But that comes from a lot of things. You're not going to go to the happy hours because you got to get on the treadmill. You're not going to go to certain things because of the workouts. But those workouts are what's going to feed that fire, and that's going to make you better. And so everybody's experienced that in some way, shape, or form. And being disciplined and steadfast in your decision to go and to be on, whatever that is, whether that's a bike workout, a swim workout, a treadmill workout that you don't really look forward to because it's boring and you don't want to have to live through that. But that's what you have to do if it's, the weather conditions dictate that that's the best you can do, or you're traveling and you have to get to the hotel, rickety treadmill and you got to get it in. So you get it in, but it's a great analogy, and it happens a lot around human nature. I'm not sure why it happens. It just does, Yeah,
I mean, we were just talking to Mason about this. He sent me a text. Coach, did you ever feel that people look down upon you for being an endurance athlete? Or because originally with one of his coaches was, I haven't really run as much as I would have liked to. And I said, I'm going to challenge you. Give me 15 minutes. Find 15 minutes today. And he called me later, texted me, and I called him, and he was running, and I was so proud of him. And he just said, things are going through my life, and I said, you're your better version when you're running, when you take care of yourself first. Before everybody wakes up, you go out and give yourself, find 10 minutes, 15-minute walk, because you're going to jumpstart positivity into the day to deal with all that, maybe that negative stuff that is happening. And I told him, I said, some of it probably not even bothers you when you're on. But now it's like, not an ankle biter. It's like a big issue. So he went on and got his runs. He did a 5K yesterday. Super proud of him. But it's that mentality of,
Oh yeah.
I got to go all in.
Yep.
When are you going to do that? When are you going to decide to cross that bridge?
You know, Sarge, you make the comment about it. There's a lack of familiarity with some of this with people that don't do it. And coming back to my own personal experience when, that high school coach reached out to me, and it's funny because in life you'll remember certain conversations and certain people. And this is one of them that still I hear it on a frequent basis today. You know, he said to me, "Look, you live in Western Pennsylvania. Football is king. You know, everybody who is popular, everybody who, knows you will know you as a football player. I get it." He goes, "But you have an opportunity to do something different. You have an opportunity to go down a path that very few people go down. You can make your own path. You can make your own name. You can do things that are truly sort of your own, and you can create your own identity. Like, you have the ability to do that kind of thing." And I think back on that conversation, and again, like, it's something that's it's been able to get me through a number of things in life, work, school. I mean, whenever I look and I go to make a life decision, I think, all right, am I making this decision because of, whatever the greater pressures around me,
The peer
whatever.
pressure,
Yeah.
the life pressure,
That's
the
right.
societal
That's
pressures, whatever.
And then I take a minute and I think, okay, what do I want to do? Like, where is my fit? What do I think I'll be successful in? What do I think I will enjoy? What will make me a better father? What will make me a better husband? What will make me generally happier, which I know will translate into success into all of those other spaces. And it's rooted in that willingness to take your own path.
Absolutely. I love it. I mean, I think all of us have done that that are sitting here today on this podcast. And this is evidence of that. This is just putting us here, putting us in front of everybody, the world really, on our stories. So thanks for that. So
One second. I do like it that Malcolm is your dad,
Yeah,
right?
that's my dad. Yeah.
And he's still winning. He won the Mars 5K on the run or something last year. He won his age group.
He's actually 81 on Tuesday. I think.
wow.
And he's still winning age groups. He beat my butt in the 5K. I can tell you that. He took me to the shed.
That's awesome. I mean, so he's kept it up regardless, because it became a lifestyle for him, a new lifestyle, from smoking pipes and doing all those things that people were expected to do in the 70s. Men were expected to do in the 70s.
He walked his own path.
Boy, I'll tell you,
figure it
it's
out.
crazy too. And I've told this to him, like, that's your greatest achievement, is that you did that and you've paid it forward, because now I run with my daughters. Like, he paid it forward 2 generations. I mean, that's a pretty substantial contribution. And I know a lot of our athletes are out there, and like, I know Mike Tanza's son is running cross country. Like,
Right.
would that have ever happened?
Probably not.
2 years ago, 3
And he knows
years
that.
ago.
Yeah, probably not.
Like, I hope that our athletes understand that what they're doing affect those around them.
It's a ripple.
Even if they're not saying it, like, even if those around you are not vocalizing, the impacts of that kind of thing, there is a downstream effect that can last decades in a positive way. You can do things that are detrimental and are negative and that will affect people that way. But conversely, you can also do things that are very positive, and they don't even have to be things that are said repeatedly. They can just be in your actions or what you pursue or your attitude. All of those things, again, they'll translate generations, decades down the road, and will benefit your grandchildren and beyond.
Well, think of the husband and wife duos now that the Kate Hollies are a perfect example of.
Agreed.
Ben would have been the guy with the pipe in the backyard, sitting watching, looking for his orange Buffalo Creek shirt, even though he didn't sign up. And now he's going to do Ironman Maryland at 140.6. Right. And him and Kate sent me a litany of their races, and some together, some singular. And it's awesome. And you see that with the Pinions. You see that with the Sagers. Like, it's now evolving into the husband and wife.
Mike and Jody Hart
Yeah,
coming
Hart,
along board. They're coming together and doing things together.
And that ripple effect created, Malcolm drew a line in the sand that created a collegiate athlete, that created a winner in life, because he one day said, I'm going to go walk. And that's funny how going to walk changes something.
Well, I think from my observations from my life and everything, your actions will always resonate deeper and longer than what you say. You know, how you act was how people want to emulate you, whether it's your children, your coworkers, your direct reports, people that work with you at work, anybody around you, no matter what community you're in, whether it's the Boy Scouts of America or some other philanthropic group that you work for, or club, or your triathlon team. Those actions are what's going to, you know, resonate the longest and come back as winning attitudes with those folks, you know, when they need them most. They're going to think back. Hopefully our children will think back about how Dad did these things.
That's right. Yeah.
I mean, it's not, I hope our athletes understand that we see it all and we feel it all, because like when Ryan Shankle finished Mighty Moraine and was like, I don't know if I'm going to buy a bike. My wife asked me to make a decision if I'm all in or if I'm not, and later that day he was eating dinner and he said, Coach, I'm all in. And I said, what changed? Did you and Erica talk? And he said, no, it was more of the fact that my daughter said, when are we going to do this?
Yeah, that's awesome.
Am I going to do one with you?
It's a beautiful thing.
And so that what Malcolm did for you, Shanks is doing for his kids.
Yeah.
He's coaching, I think, softball, football in his town, and they're all seeing it. So maybe he's quietly changing other people's lives because he's leading in his community. Mm-hmm. So I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, one of the things that I experienced as a kid that was, again, maybe a little different from the time, but did translate very well, was once we started running, my dad became curious about other endurance sports, and we did start cycling. So here we are, and I can remember, riding to my grandmother's house, which was 27 miles from our house, and my dad and I would go out. We bought all the gear back then, the helmets, the shoes, and everything, and we would do the ride. And then before I knew it, I was entering some bike races in my late teens. I can remember doing these pack races and thinking, this is crazy. We're going super fast and we're all tucked in tight, but I felt comfortable. I felt confident, because my dad had taken me out. He showed me what to do. He showed me how to ride, all this stuff. And then winter came along and we noticed that we weren't running as much. And I lived close to Erie at the time, so we were in the snow belt. So we were getting, up there, you get a ton of snow. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so it makes running outside difficult. And there weren't really treadmills back then. And so what we did was we researched what cross-country skiing was, and we started cross-country skiing.
Hence, you do that with your family.
Yeah,
now.
I do that with my daughters today.
I was wondering where that came from.
Yeah, and back then, it developed into, well, let's try this because it's a way to continue training in the winter. And then I can remember my dad coming to me and saying, look, I had a friend that said there's actually cross-country ski races. And I was like, dude, sign me up. Let's go. And again, just that curiosity to continue in any of those endurance sport spaces. I mean, for me, I absolutely love it because I love the endurance sport world. But in hindsight, the bigger picture was the bonding with my dad, that him teaching me to you have to explore anything in life. If you want to experience life, you've got to explore those different areas and then just pursue it and try it. And you don't know how it's going to turn out. Maybe you love it, maybe you don't, but give it a shot.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Really good stuff. So we know that, you guys met during your coaching softball, actually, with your daughters. Mm-hmm. Then started training and we started seeing Scott come around. We went to Muskoka together and raced a 70.3 in Canada.
I remember we had an 18-mile run and we were running up by Adams Park. And I think it was so treacherous.
Oh, yeah, the ice.
That we could have slid on our pants down one of the hills.
Yeah.
It was so bad.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah. And Scotty came out of that with icicles coming off his earlobes.
Yeah,
It was so cold.
Oh yeah.
It's still, you're still sweating, but then it's freezing on your ears. And we've lived through all of that, and we're been racing. We've done this for almost 10 years together, virtually. And then, we kind of, stepped back from our heavy race schedule, went in some different directions. I spent a lot of time with my son and the Boy Scouts of America trying to get them ready for high adventure camps and doing 100-mile backpacks in New Mexico and things of that nature. Kenny went into the marathon swim arena and started doing 18-mile to 20-plus mile swims with tugboat and those types of things. You went into really heavy on coaching high school track and your daughters and their friends and the teams there with Mars track and field. But then things started changing again, and I want to get to the story, but before we get to the story of how Victory came to be, I want to talk to each of you, or have each of you chime in on, what was the moment when like a switch just kind of got flipped, or you think that, things were really starting to, go into this mode of where you were going to start Victory, Kenny?
Yeah. So I think I knew at a certain point, maybe 15, 20 years ago, that I was always meant to coach. I was always meant to coach. God didn't make me to be a salesman in whatever product that is. I think I was always meant to do something to lead people. So whether that was coaching Springdale Dynamo baseball, whether that was starting River City Venom, I just fully feel like when I want to do something, I'm going to do it the best as I can, and no one's going to be better. And so I think as I went down the road, I kind of knew, okay, there's something more for me than I wasn't fulfilled. I was fulfilled having a family. I was fulfilled doing what I've done in my career. But then there was something missing, and Scott has always been around. And that's the funny thing is, when you look at Coach Nelson was on the outside and Scott was on the outside, and maybe Tugboat and I were closer at a certain point. Then maybe you and I were on the outsides because we went different ways. But if you said, hey, let's do a Thanksgiving run, everybody would come out. Mm-hmm. And it's that same common, we've all walked through this. And there was always a lot of love, trust, respect. So even though we kind of went different ways, it's kind of always came full circle, because when you went through it together, everybody always would run back in, because there's something about it's always that going to cheers and having your stole waiting for you. Mm-hmm. You might, Sarge may not have sat on that stole for the couple years, but that's his. And when he comes, he's going to sit right there, and we're going to pick up like we didn't miss anything. So I think, when that podcast went down, I had no clue that we would be ending up in Victory. Okay. And I just knew that was a pretty dark time, and I wanted to go and share my story. I had no clue what they were even going to ask me, but it was 2 hours later, and I'm sitting there at home, and all of a sudden I said to Say, I'm like, I started this, I had like 900 Instagram followers, and all of a sudden I wake up the next day and I have 2,000. And then the next day I have 3,000, and then I have 4,000. And this is all before Victory was even, the groundwork was laid. And so through there, I started getting really random, like, hey, are you getting that Brooks shoe sponsorship? Hey, are you getting this? Or hey, are you getting that? And that's kind of when, Bobby came out of nowhere and said, hey, I want to run. Maybe it was going to do a 13-1. Mm-hmm. And then it was, hey, can you meet me at a bike store? I'm going to buy a bike. Then he's like, I think I'm going to do an Ironman, not a half. I'm going to do a full, and let's do it 6 months later. So that's when I kind of started it with him. And at that point in time, my last couple races were a marathon and an Ironman. And I was coached by Coach Bowles. And Scott helped me big time on my run. I had an injury at one point, and it was a blood clot. He had one, so he knew what to do with it. He told me on the blood clot, he said, just don't go on the bike and get hit by a car, because I think you had a blood clot. You got cleared and got run over by a car, right?
I did, that's right. Yep.
So he said, I'll coach you, but just don't get hit by it. So he had... he had taken me kind of under his wing and, was telling me all the stories about just training and what to do. And so I knew how to do it, but I needed to have somebody watching over me. So I had dipped into his prowess for a couple years, and I knew how good he was, and I knew the sincerity of it. And, I think there's a picture of us at Ironman Lake Placid of me finishing, and I had given everything I had. And I think I only had a couple times to do long runs. And you were waiting at the finish line. There was a big hug, a lot of love there. And so when I started with Bobby, it was, I all of a sudden, there was no structure. There was no training peaks. I was sending him text of like, hey, do this, do that. And then I said to Scott one day on a run, I'm like, hey, there's this guy did this podcast, which he heard. I'm like, he's doing Ironman. Would you help me get together and coach him? And we both started working together, talking to him. And that kind of got, I think, the wheels kind of spinning.
Of what could be, right?
Of what could be.
Of what could be.
Yeah, of what could be. And so then it was awesome because you're dealing with a guy that hadn't swam, bike, or ran at all to all of a sudden doing it. Yeah, go do a 7-mile run. Okay, I've never really run 7, but I'm going to do a trail run. And then he calls me and says, my wife blew her ACL out, all this stuff. And, he was trying to be keto, and, I asked for Scott's help, and that's when Scott really stepped in and started coaching alongside of me. And Lord only knows what happened after Ironman.
Right.
So
you guys take Bobby all the way to Florida that year.
And we go to Florida.
And you go to Florida. So Scott, you're with Kenny at Florida. Yeah. I kind of suspect a light bulb went off at some point.
It did, yeah. Coming back to Kenny's comment about, he is he feels like coaching is his calling and that's a natural fit. For me, I never felt that way. I always felt like when my oldest daughter started getting into sports, and it was with softball that I met Kenny, and through our daughters, I just wanted to be present. I just wanted to be around. I'd never really envisioned myself as a coach.
You didn't want to be in the stands screaming at the coach, at the players.
I wanted to do it from the dugout.
Yeah. Or you would stand right on the fence, right behind his head, and yell at the coach.
That's right. No, I just, I just wanted to be around, and Kenny was super welcoming to that. Like I just, was willing to do anything. I can remember back softball days. Like I was so happy just sitting there doing soft toss with the kids, or, whatever, just helping them run bases. The most, remedial tasks. I was very much enjoying that. So I think probably that's where I was like, that kind of, I was like, this is kind of fun. Like I like being engaged with the kids, and I do like the encouragement side of it, but I'm not sure I was still envisioned like the coaching side of it. For me personally, it was when my oldest daughter started running with me, and, we would go out and we would just kind of walk, jog 3 miles. And we did that for like a month or two. And then she actually came back around the next summer, similar to my story, and said, hey, I wanted to go get a little more serious about this. And then she started to get a little faster and started to get a little faster. And then I found I had to ride my bike to keep up with her. And
from somebody that never liked to run.
That never even enjoyed running.
She hated it in softball.
Dreaded it. And so it got to the point where I was like, oh my gosh, like this is, I'm not sure I know how to coach. Like this is like, her elevation of performance really frightened me in terms of like, I feel like I need to elevate my performance as a coach. And that's when I went and pursued my USA track and field certification. So I can remember.
And that was pre-COVID. So you had to like drive to Maryland and
I went to
spend
DC.
a week in a hotel almost.
Right.
Or DC.
Yeah.
Okay.
And had to take a legitimate test at the end and pass it. And I was like, wow, this is crazy. But I came away from that experience and I was like, wow, this is opening up my eyes to so many, perspectives on training that I didn't consider over the years, and historically, my training had always just been to run hard and then run hard and then run hard and then run hard. And then what happened was I started to learn a little bit more about the science behind it and why you don't always want to run hard every day. You need those recovery days. there's a process that builds success. And if you outline that over the long term, you can really develop as an endurance athlete. And so once I started to learn some of that, then I started to think, oh, okay, I can take this back and apply this now to my daughter. And then what happened was she actually said to me, look, they're looking for coaches on the team. They're short of help. And I was like, well, I'll do it. Like, if it's okay with you, I would love to jump in. And just started through that avenue and found that I really enjoyed the experience. Like that I think for me was the hook. Like, I started to see success with kids that were, again, they weren't very confident. They weren't very athletic. And then, by the end of the season, they're out there running with confidence and winning and doing all these other things. And I was like, oh my gosh, like for me, that was like a moment where I was like, I can actually pay this forward, on a recurring basis and affect, many lives at one time. And so for me, like that was so rewarding. And that's where I kind of doubled down in the coaching space. And I just started reading more. I have stacks of books at home I've read, like just, breathing techniques, running techniques, like I just started to try and absorb as much as I could because I wanted to make sure that I was, that I was doing what I needed to do to fulfill my obligations as a coach. I didn't want to disappoint my athletes. And all of that was going on. And that's about the time that Kenny came to me and said, I was on this podcast. There's an athlete that would like trained, and mentioned Bobby. And I didn't know Bobby. But obviously Kenny and I had a great relationship, and I was like, yeah, let's meet. Let's sit down. Let's map out what that will look like and give it a shot. Like and what we did was Kenny and I sat and I said, well, here's what I think that could look like. And we talked about, yeah, let's tweak this, let's tweak that. He's stronger here. He's, maybe weaker here. And through that, we took sort of that long-term plan. We said, okay, we brought him in. We actually met at my house, sat down at a computer, and we said, Bobby, here's the plan. You have to follow this.
Right.
Do not deviate from this plan.
Not on a short string of 26 weeks, right?
And without endurance racing experience,
that's from zero, really on that. Now, age and athleticism, weightlifting, and those types of things in his background, but really from zero on endurance,
Correct.
Zero on triathlon, and coming from that. So you had a short string to work with.
That's right. And really, I and Bobby did great. Like he really did. And I believe most of the listeners here will be familiar with his story. But he went to Florida and he did fantastic. Like
Knocked it out.
He followed the race strategy that we had laid out, and we talked about the importance of goals. We talked about and I'm a big believer in 3 goals. You should have 3 goals for everything that you're doing. The first goal is that's your dream goal. Like if everything goes right,
stretch goal,
the stars align. Yeah, I am going to be able to achieve, what I thought I could never, ever, ever sniff as a goal. The next one down, that's the one that we're shooting for. That's the one that we think, hey, realistically, we've put all of this training together. We've prepared. We're going into this race. We think that's where it is. And then the last goal is, look, if everything falls apart, if the wheels come off the cart and everything gets sideways, this is the goal we're going to hit that still allows us to feel that sensation of achievement. And we talked to Bobby about that. We were like, hey, look, let's talk about the goals here. The goal is you want to become an Ironman, and this is the path we're going to take to do that. And we talked about the race strategy and all of that. He fulfilled all of that great. I do think part of his success was the combination of Kenny and I. And so our styles complement each other very, very well. And so for our athletes, I always encourage them, like, you should be talking to both of us because, I don't want to say we're good cop, bad cop, but Kenny definitely has the ability, and I'm very much humbled by this, to connect with people and to, inspire them to drive to a new level. I think that encouragement, that inspiration, I think that people thrive on that. They need to hear that. And again, that's applicable across all spaces in life.
Absolutely.
I definitely have a tendency to be a little bit more upfront with information. And so, I can see, based on people's performances, if I believe they are tracking in the right direction or not. And I am, I definitely pride myself on being honest in those spaces. And so where, I may come in and say, look, you got to step up. If you truly want to achieve the goals we've laid out, you're going to need to deliver more. Or sometimes you need to deliver less. Sometimes people are attempting to try and do too much.
Correct. Absolutely.
And I'm like, look, you got to come back a little bit because again, we've laid out a path and this is what we want to do to pursue to hit that. And again, the reason why I think our styles complement each other so well is because, I may come in and say, look, I appreciate the work that you're doing, but you really need to do X. And sometimes people react well to that. Sometimes they don't. And then Kenny can come in and he'll say, yeah, I understand what Coach Scott is saying. And here's why I believe that will connect to a bigger success in a bigger picture. And I think the complement of styles there benefits our athletes. I think it helped Bobby. And really, I think it helped a lot of our athletes. I think it helps them today, obviously. But when I think back about like Chris Cullen, we had a number of conversations with Chris about, definitions of goals and expectations. And here's what your path is going to look like. I think about him. I think about some of the early guys that came to us, Potts. You know? He again, not an endurance athlete at all. He was just curious. We had same kind of conversations with him. Here's what I think you have to do. Here's how I think you can achieve it.
I think it's it's an enormous value add that Victory Multisport brings to the athletes to have multiple coaches on the case, on their plan. Yes, you have one primary that's going to do most of the work of the mechanics and getting it in peaks and the daily monitoring, but there's always at least two others in that mix, depending on the athlete's needs. We're going to go with the best, strongest set of coaches for those athletes. It's a game changer. It's a competitive advantage, not to give away secrets on the free podcast, but it's a competitive advantage because there's always going to be somebody watching or looking to evaluate how's it going, whether it's performance-based, very strictly performance-based, it's overall macro plan-based, or it's in that motivational, emotional support, picking you up, dusting you off, smacking you on the back and getting you back in the game kind of place, which I think Kenny is awesome at that for every single one of our athletes. So we bring him in on every case, but he would not have it any other way to do it that way. And so it's a huge advantage. I think that was born with your first go and now has been translated to many, many, many other athletes. Yeah,
well, I wanted to add one thing, and then we'll figure out that moment of when Victory was born. Like even Mike Tanza. I mean, Tanza will tell you probably the turning point on his training is it was either he shortened a bike or he shortened a run or he missed one. And it was a Sunday morning, and you called me and said he texted about stacking a run on top of something. And we called Mike, and I looped him right on the phone. And I think about 35 minutes, because I was going to watch Ian play flag football, and I think we cried. We were barking at him. We're like, Mike, we're doing this because we know what your goal is. And we want this probably equally, if not more than you do. And he understood that. And the thing about it, that might have been his turning point, because, in the kids space, when you coach kids in softball or kids in track, at a certain point, you're not coaching the kid. You're coaching the parent. And that's the unfortunate thing. With us, we get to coach the athlete, and we get to have those conversations, and Bobby will still tell you the time he called Scott and said, "Hey man, I really need a day off." And Scott's like, "Yeah, I mean, I probably would do the workout. But you can take the day off if you want." And he still laughs about that. But
we have some very famous rebuttals from Coach Scott with that. Right?
I can think of,
you want to do that hill? Well, not really.
Well, I mean,
Tracy says,
that was on me. Scott is one of those ones like, I can't run this morning. My grandma died. Oh, sweet. Well, come on out and run. We'll go through it. Right. We'll talk about it. Yeah. But no, that was
muscle man doesn't care.
Yeah,
that's right.
Show up the perimeter. No, but those are some of the things that I hope our athletes understand, you do have somebody that is equally sitting in the background watching, and he's saying they're tracking perfectly. He knows when you're getting off course. I know usually 2 or 3 steps ahead of them that they're mentally screwed up, and I'm jumping in and I'm helping them.
Right.
Because to me, that's the perfect balance of that good cop, bad cop, that Walt, that Jesse from the Breaking Bad that I always say.
Well, it's about playing off everybody's strengths, and that's strength in the time commitment that you're able to focus on any one athlete or group of athletes. It's on the expertise on what is needed in the moment, and being able to provide that just right prescription at the right moment probably has saved countless triathlon careers in the last 2 years because of that approach. So it's fantastic. So, did the light bulb go off at that race?
Yeah,
Scott.
Absolutely.
Yeah. You guys start back of the napkin, start figuring some things out.
Yeah. I mean, for me personally, I remember Kenny and I were sitting on a bench outside of a surf shop watching runners go by, waiting for everybody. And for me, that's where I had my sort of moment. And I think it was building up to that point. I think we were both kind of dancing around the topic a little bit. I actually remember we were trying to chase Bobby down on the bike, and and at that point, we were kind of talking about it a little bit. And I said to Kenny, I remember driving, and I was like, man, my only hesitation is I worry about time. Like, I just don't know if I can, give people the time that they'll deserve. And, Kenny, true to form, was like, don't worry about it. Like, it's not just you. It's going to be us. It's going to be others. And sure enough, that's exactly how it's evolved. Like, everybody that has been willing and able to bring stuff to the table has over time and their own skills, which has really served us and the athletes well. But that was probably, my moment was when we were just sitting on a bench outside the surf shop watching people run by. I felt like, yeah, we can do this.
Mine was probably about an hour later as we were in the dark. We were now in the dark, and we were sitting on a hotel wall waiting for Bobby to come in because he was like 4 miles out, and we knew he was going to be there any minute. And you were analyzing the runners, and you're like, that runner took off too fast. They're walking now. Watch this one who's doing a walk run. They're going to keep passing them, and you were just starting to get your juices flowing. But that would have been that night.
Little form critiques here and there.
Yeah.
It happens. I mean, when you have an eye for it and you've studied it, you've read as many books as you've read, you've done the things that we've all done to get certified, you know more now, and you're like, whoa, that's going to be a hard day, right? By that person. You can just see it in their face and in the way they're struggling with, whatever the mechanical issue might be in the moment. So,
but the interesting thing though is like the LLC fell in our lap. I mean, legitimately, all of a sudden, we had to wait for just a clearance at work for Scott to be okay. And no sooner than Lauren has the LLC done, and I think we had clients coming in. And I'll never forget coming back from Panama City, Mike Tanza is sending me direct messages, will you coach me for a 10K? And things started to just kick off at that point.
Yeah, it's great. So who were some of those first athletes? Sounds like Mikey might have been one of them that reached out. You talked about Potsy,
Bull,
Colin.
Yeah.
I think Snipes was in there pretty early.
Yeah.
Don in Ohio was in there. I mean, Jace was in there. We had a whole slew that kind of Cole up in Canada. Just came out of nowhere. And that was the thing. I think Scott and I were, sitting there like, oh man, that would be really cool if we had 20 athletes. And I think within the first 3 months, we had 12 or 15. And when we first started, I think we were sending texts because at that point, we were getting things set up, the infrastructure. We didn't have training peaks, so we were sending texts to the guys like, hey, do this on these days. And, so it's just showing you where we went from day one to all of a sudden. That's why I just think, to me, God's way of saying, hey, this is meant to be. So before you guys even think too hard on it, you're going to have an LLC. You're going to have that 8 to 10 people. Moose Miller was right in there too. I mean, it's like all those guys were right in the mix right off the bat. And that was the testament of what us two were bringing to the table. That's only spun out, and it's almost, it's like a bonfire spreading.
And I've been here with you for the last year of it, and just seen it continue to grow and to continue to catch fire, as you said. So it's been amazing, and I think it is because of the approach that you two have taken to build it out this way, the counsel and effort that you spent even on me and helping me come along and teaching me certain things. And all the other coaches that are involved in this as well, learning from all of us now, and even getting synergies with our 7 coaches on staff, of getting those specialties and having us learn from them as well, co-mentorships, if you will, in some ways, so that we're all getting better at different aspects that we were not exposed to before, that we knew existed but didn't know the science behind it, and learning from that.
I really feel like our athletes push us. Like, I love that aspect of it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I love getting the questions. I love, the performances, and sometimes the performances get better, sometimes not. I mean, that's just the way it kind of shakes out. But the fact that, like, people keep coming back and they keep aspiring to do like more races or bigger races and stuff like that. Again, it to me, it feels similar to what I felt like when my daughter started running, since Victory. I know Kenny and I, we've pursued and achieved our Ironman coaching certification. I know, Kenny, you and Sarge have the USA triathlon certification. It's like, none of that probably wouldn't have happened had it not been for the Victory athletes and what, how they have pursued different races and how they've performed. It continuously makes me want to up my game.
Absolutely. I mean, we're working on getting a nutritionist to help us, because we've been asked, at least in the last week, no less than 4 times about that type of detail and information and coaching and advice that we're not going to give, because we're not qualified to do that. We can talk about race strategy, nutrition, and things that we've done and that we know work, but to really truly go back and go through everybody's full nutrition plan, we need that in the on the team. So we're working on that. So pushing us to find these other capabilities, I think, as we develop the core emphasis on the athletes and what they need and what they're asking for, I think has been awesome. So it's right to your point that they're going to ask the questions and we're going to find the answers. We're going to get the right people on the solution that's going to give them the best quality product.
Yeah. I mean, when we were going through the process of starting the business, and not many people know, I mean, Victory came from a swim. I mean, Scott was swimming, and I think you did an hour-long swim, and you texted me as soon as you were done the swim, hey, I think maybe this or that or this, but for whatever reason, Victory keeps coming up.
The name.
Yeah.
What sprung on your head about that? Like, what was the...
Yeah,
because there was a couple things that you had shared.
Yeah, I can remember when we first just started talking about, setting up the business and stuff. And, I really, I appreciate Kenny's faith-based life. And I really wanted to lean into that because I felt like, just for me personally, like, I know I don't talk a lot about like my faith and stuff, but from a family perspective, my grandfather was a Methodist minister. My dad is active in his church. So I have a tendency to keep my faith a little bit more to myself, but I felt like that was something that we could both lean into. So we started talking about, like, I think one of the names we kicked around was like Trinity, to play off of the triathlon as well as the religious side of it. But I think there was a Trinity Tri Club out there already. then we started looking at like biblical animals, and I think we kicked around like lion and a couple other things like that, but couldn't really find anything that stuck. And so one morning I just jumped in the pool, and I was like, man, like, what's just important to me? Like what, it just started reflecting on a lot of the stuff that we just talked about today over the years. Like, what's been the one thing that I keep thinking about when I think about this sport? And I know this probably won't sound the best, but honestly, it was winning. Mm-hmm. Like for me, it was like, man, like it's like an addiction. Like I love winning. And so I started and that's when I started thinking more about, well, what has winning looked like for me over the years? And then I realized, winning today looks entirely different than it used to, and it should, but the feeling is the same. Mm-hmm. And so that's where I felt like, man, victory. Like, again, we all have those personal victories, and they're not just in the endurance sport space. It's everywhere. It's advancing your education. It's work. It's relationships at home. And for me, that's what really resonated. And I think and Kenny's right, I jumped out of the pool, and I think I texted him and said, let's talk or something. And we ended up chatting, and I was like, man, like, what do you think of victory? Can we just call it victory? And he was like, yeah, let's go. And then then we started working on the logo, and I can remember sitting in Kenny's dining room going through this, and the V actually started with a effort that Kenny had put forth to, and my apologies, a little tough to say this. So it was in support of my oldest daughter, who, sorry.
That's okay, Bob.
She has lupus, and sorry, and Kenny put together a fundraiser, and for that fundraiser, we used a Roman numeral 5 because there's 5 people in my family, and so when we put victory together, we chose a V, and that means a lot.
Absolutely, Scott. And, we appreciate you so much. We appreciate the struggles that you've had personally with your family. We were there in Bermuda and ran with you in support of that original Roman numeral 5 team victory back then, before this was ever born.
Team Dark and Stormy,
Team Dark and Stormy, but it
Yeah.
had the V, and we had the purple shirts
with the
to
the V
represent
on it.
Kenna and her
Kenna
struggles.
Kenna strong.
Kenna strong. So, I don't know what more we can say. I think you've said everything. I think it's been a fantastic day to sit down with both of you and hear the story of really how this has grown from the time you were 10 and ran with your dad, or ran with your dad the very first time, excuse me, to all of the other accomplishments that have been ticked off to get to this place, to have the group of athletes that we collectively coach and that we dearly love and are trying to help accomplish their goals, keep them safe, get them to the finish line in the best possible shape. That's always the phrase I use with the athlete is get them there in the best possible shape to be victorious over whatever they're trying to accomplish. And that could be going fast and beating everybody else, or that could be just to finish because they never thought in their wildest dream they could do that. And we can get them there. So I want to thank you for being with us. Thank you for sharing your story. And thanks for everybody listening. Follow us on Instagram at Victory Multisport. And please like and share this podcast on Spotify.